Hey everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm here today to share with you an ocean shaker card. This card I made for the CardMaker magazine and Craftin Desert Divas blog hop, but I'm going to be using the brand new Mermaid Lagoon stamp set. Now this is the entire stamp set you see in front of you. I've just stamped out a bunch of the images and now I'm going to quickly color in the ones I want to use. Now this stamp set was just released this month and it is in the Craftin Desert Divas online shop, and I'm going to be using a few of the new products that were just released. I'm using my alcohol markers to go ahead and quickly color these in, and I'm not going to color them all in right now. I just want to color in the ones I want to use. So I colored in the mermaid on the left hand side, and you can see I haven't colored in her skin yet. I find that if I wait for my other colors to dry, I have less of a chance of everything bleeding. So I just wait a few minutes for all of my other darker colors to dry, and then I come and fill in the skin tones. Now I went ahead and colored in two of the little rocks with the seaweed on them, two of the shells, the shell with the pearl, and now I colored in that mermaid on the right hand side as well. I then quickly fussy cut out all the images that I colored and went around them with a black marker just for a nice finished look. Now I have some of my items already ready to go. I have an A2 side folding card base. I have a piece of watercolor paper that is big enough to fit behind this frame I am making. And then I also used that inside, just the rectangle with just the stitching on it, no scallops. I used that to cut a piece of white cardstock, and then I used the ocean border dies, you'll see right there, to go ahead and cut that right down at the bottom for an overlay on my frame that I've made here. Now to make that frame, I used one of my all-time favorite die sets, the Fancy Frames dies, and I just inlaid the larger scallop stitch circle with the smaller rectangle, just the regular stitched rectangle in that set, to create a little frame for my shaker card. Now what I'm working on now is just a piece of watercolor paper that I have cut to be large enough to fit behind that rectangle frame that I made earlier, that will also have enough space to add some adhesive on. So I just sized it up and trimmed it out very quickly. Now I'm just sponging on some distress inks in different shades of blue. I have Salty Ocean, Mermaid Lagoon, and I also threw in a little bit of Evergreen Bow just for a little bit more of a green color. Sometimes when you look in ocean water, you do have that green tint to it, so I wanted to add that in. And I'm just layering these colors up. I want to add a lot of color because I am going to add some water splatters later on, so I want that really bleached look. Now once I have those on, I've got a paintbrush and my water bottle here, and I'll just dip that in and then sprinkle on some water droplets. Now I am adding quite a few here. I want this to have a nice splattered effect, so I'm just really layering these up. Once that was all done, I let it sit for a couple minutes. I went and got myself something to drink, came back to my craft room, and then I used that paper towel to just wipe up the water that was left on there. You can see I get a really bleached effect with that. It almost looks like I've taken it back to the white that it was originally. Then I used my spray bottle, put a couple squirts right on top, laid my paper towel on top, soaked up that water, and I get the ridges from my paper towel in that background that I've created, which is a great look for the ocean. Now my paper towel had ridges on it. You might want to look at the design of your paper towel before you go about doing that. But it's a really neat effect to get with that. Then I added a few layers of shimmer mist from Imagine Crafts. This is in Frost, and you can see the shine that it really gives that. I spray from about 6 inches above the paper, and just a few squirts does the trick. Now for my ocean border die that I created earlier, I'm going to color this up with my distress inks. Now, whenever I'm using my distress inks, especially on regular cardstock, they tend to blend a little bit better on your watercolor paper. It has a little bit more slip to it and it lays on top of the paper. On regular cardstock, it tends to absorb into the paper. So what I like to do to kind of get that grainy look, I add a lighter layer before I add my darker layer like I did here. Adding on that layer of antique photo really allows me to put on this darker color and not have to worry about so much or so many of those harsh lines that I would get if I were just to add this vintage photo straight on. It also allows me to not add as much so you don't see the white cardstock straight behind it. You see that antique photo, so it's not straight on white paper. Now for the little, what are those called? Seaweeds, I guess is what they are, coming up out of the sand. I'm going to color those with 2 different colors of greens. I used a little bit of Twisted Citron, and then I came right at the base with a little bit of Mowed Lawn, just for a little dimensional looking seaweed. Now on the coral, I'm going to be using 2 different colors. I'm starting off with Abandoned Coral, kind of a perfect name to color your corals with. And then I'll move on to some Dusty Concord, and I am just using scrap pieces of white cardstock to mask off the rest of the area around those coral and the seaweed very quickly. You could use painter's tape, but I found this a little bit easier and not as time consuming. Now once I have that all done, I'm going to use that shimmer mist that I used beforehand, again about 6 inches above that bottom coral cardstock piece. I'm going to go ahead and give that a few spritzes and let it dry. Now to put my shaker card together, I cut a piece of acetate, and this is the acetate that I use. You can find it at your local craft store or online. I like it because I can send it through my printer, so I can foil on it, or I can heat emboss on it as well. It can take the heat of my heat gun. But I cut a piece of that to fit on that frame. I used some paper adhesive, paper tape adhesive on the back of that frame. Put my little acetate piece down, and now I'm going to add my fun foam around that frame. Now I like to use fun foam with some double-sided adhesive attached to it. I just find it easier. Foam tape kind of makes me mad, especially when I have to cut it in half. My scissors get stuck to it. I get frustrated, so I find I make more interactive cards like this whenever I use fun foam and just attach my own adhesive to it. Now around that frame, I'm just attaching these small little strips of the fun foam, and then before I put in my sequins, I'm going to go ahead and use my embossing bag on the inside of that frame. Acetate tends to keep a lot of static to it, and then my sequins want to act a little wonky inside there, so I just use that to get rid of any static. Pour in my sequins. This is the Fairy Dust sequin mix from Craftin Desert Divas. I sprinkled quite a few of those in. Then I went ahead and I'm going to peel off the backing paper from the adhesive. If you find that your sequins want to jump out, just take your backing paper off beforehand. Then I went ahead and laid that ocean that I created with my distress inks earlier over the back of that. Added more adhesive on the back of that. And then I'll go ahead and remove that backing paper and attach the entire piece to an A2 sized white side folding card base that I had made beforehand. Now it was time to start putting my scene together on top of that shaker. So I went ahead and made that inlay with the Fancy Frames and Ocean Border die set that I colored with my distress inks. I added some adhesive on the back of that. I did use a mixture of paper adhesive and also liquid adhesive on the top of those coral and seaweed. Then I'm going to be using a liquid adhesive multi-medium matte to attach the rest of my little pieces on this scene. So I went ahead and stuck down my 2 mermaids first, and I did lay these out beforehand. You can see I'm playing around with the kind of layout of this card as I go along. And one thing that I find helpful, you can see I'm doing it here, is to put an acrylic block with something heavy on top of those as they dry. That way they dry nice and flat and everything adheres to the card, and you don't have a little piece of seaweed sticking up here or a piece of hair there or an arm kind of hanging out to the side. Everything sticks down nice and flat that way. Then I used a flag banner die to go ahead and cut that sentiment, time to celebrate, and attach that with some fun foam right in the top left hand corner. There's a nice look at that shimmer too. I'm using a flashlight to shine on there so you can get a nice look at it. But that finished off the card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video tutorial, and make sure you head over to my blog after this video because there is a blog hop going on with the entire CardMaker magazine design team as well as the Craftin Desert Divas design team. And there's a $75 Craftin Desert Divas shop credit up for grabs, so make sure you hop along and leave comments on all the blogs to better your chances of winning. On the left side of your screen, you're going to see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you over to my blog where you can hop along with this blog hop, and the bottom right will subscribe you to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!